Hey everybody, Ron LeGrand here. And a couple of days ago, one of our students sent me a question based on how to use a financial calculator, and it occurred to me, I don't think I've ever taught a class and put it online where I teach you how to use a financial calculator. Now, if you're going to do business today in the terms world or anywhere where you're computing payments or anything that goes along with financing, outside or inside of owner financing, you're going to have to learn how to use the financial calculator. But fortunately for you, they're free today. So the first thing I want you to do is go and download this app called EZ Calculator. If you don't already have it, go ahead and do it right now, because we're going to be live and I'm going to be working on that app, and we're going to work on 5 problems. This is what you call an interactive video here, because you're going to be working right alongside of me. If you can get that app downloaded, do it right now while I'm talking. Get that app downloaded, EZ Calculator. It doesn't matter what kind of phone you have, it's an app, so download it immediately. While you're doing that, I want you to know that when I started learning this financial calculator stuff back in the early 80s, like 1982, we had a handheld that was about that big called HP 12C. Cost $150 for that little calculator. This app is free. Okay. Then later we went to the HP 10B, which was a simpler, and I think I paid about $80 for that. So today, all you got to do is download this app. And frankly, they've made it so simple, anyone can do these financial calculations, and I'll show you why as you participate. So get that thing downloaded. Uh-oh, what happened? Get that thing downloaded so we can get to work here. EZ Calculator, right there, EZ Calculator, and get it down. So I'm going to go over here to my iPad, and I'm going to open it up so you can see what it looks like after you get it downloaded. So right there it is. Really, really, really simple. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go up to the board here and explain to you what you have to do to solve any financial calculation here that you have 3 of the 4 numbers that you need. Then we're going to do it on here, and then you can see how it works, and then you can play this video back if you don't completely understand it, because once you see how easy this is, you'll find that it doesn't take that much training. So let's start by going to the board here, and I'll try to keep this thing lit up for you. So up here at the top, you'll have the buttons that you'll find on any financial calculator. PV stands for present value. That means that's what the number is today. That's what's owed today, or what you're trying to calculate that you're about to. Let's say you're buying a house from a seller and you're giving them a mortgage for $300,000, then that's the number that you will owe, present value. PMT stands for payment. So you'll see our first problem, we're going to calculate the payment. FV stands for future value, and that will always be 0 unless you're actually trying to compute what the future value is. For example, let's say I want to invest $10,000 at 10%, and I want to know what it's worth 8 years from now. Well, you can compute that on here. It's not one of my calculations today, but that's what future value is about. You won't be using it in any of the calculations that you're going to be doing buying houses for the most part. Now this says I. Now I believe your calculator, your app says annual rate, but it's interest. This is your annual interest rate right here, and this is the number of payments, or periods, as it shows on your calculator. So, got your app downloaded yet? Do I need to wait longer? Well, if you don't, then you're going to have to play this thing back and download it before you do. All right, so let's start with problem number 1. Present value. Let's just take an example. I'm buying a house from a seller with owner financing, and the mortgage that my attorney is going to create, or if they don't have it, if it's free and clear, it'll be a first mortgage, is $300,000. So I know the present value. Okay? Again, that future value is 0. I'm not trying to figure that in here. And let's say we've agreed on a 4% interest rate, so I know that, so I can plug that into my calculation. And we've agreed on a 360-month term. Now there may or may not be a balloon in that. Don't worry, I'm going to show you how to calculate the balloon anyway when I'm done. But this is a 30-year term. So we know the number of months is 360, the interest rate is 4%, and we know the present value is 300. So now we got to go calculate what the payment is. So let's go to your calculator, and if you'll see, I've already got them plugged in there for you. Just type in 300,000 on the top button. You don't have to hit PV, you don't have to hit them, just type it in there. The only time you'll hit the buttons on the right is when you're trying to solve for that blank. So I typed in the payment. By the way, I've tried it both ways. You do not have to put the minus sign in front of the payment on this calculator. On some of them you do, like your HPs. I just put in, oh, I'm sorry, we're trying to solve for the payment. Excuse me, forget that. I should have left that blank. It don't exist. Ignore that, jury. All right, so I put a 0 on future value. Now, in this case, I got to put 4% in there. That's incorrect. So I'm going to put 4% in there. And in this case, I got to put 360 months in there. Just like you're doing right now, if you're watching this. So I have a payment of, I'm trying to solve for the payment, I'll knock that out. So I have present value 300, future value 0, annual interest rate 4%, and periods 360. So I've got 3 of the 4 numbers that I need. Now all I have to do is press the payment button, and up pops the monthly payment, principal and interest, at 4%, which is $1,432.25 a month. So knowing that, I can write that in right there. Now, of course, I did these calculations before I started this video, so I know what the answers are going to be. And as you can see here, I'm going to use this same example all the way throughout to make it simple as I can for you without changing a bunch of numbers. All right? So now, let's go to this second problem here. We know our payment's $1,432.25. We know our present value is 0, because I said so. We know our interest rate's 4%. And now let's say we are negotiating with the seller, and we find out he's got 222 months left on his original 360-month loan. Okay? Now you may or may not know that while you're in his house, and probably I'd suggest you don't even worry about this while you're in the house. When I'm doing a contract in the house, I don't need to know all these numbers. I'll just put on there TBD, which means before closing we'll have this stuff figured out, and I'm probably going to get your attorney to help you. So if I know he's got, maybe he told me he's got 222 months left. Maybe he pulled out a statement that says that. Then I am going to have to solve for, well, what does he owe right now? Now look, I'm going to tell you before I go any further, the easiest way to do these things is see if he's got an amortization schedule, because if he does, all your answers are right there on it. And his amortization schedule will tell you by looking at what today's date is, it'll tell you what he owes right now. But we're assuming you don't have the luxury of having that ammo schedule in front of you. All right? So let's go back to the board, and let's change these numbers. You just don't erase it. Just leave it alone. So we are trying to solve for present value, so get that one out of there. Can't use that, so we're going to make that a blank right now. So the payment is still the same, $1,432 a month. Still 0 future value, still have the same interest rate, but now we have to change the periods, the payments, to 222 to solve for this particular problem. Okay, remember I said we know they owe 222 more payments. So I'm trying to figure out what's the amount they owe right now. So now all we have to do is press present value, bump, and up comes the number. $224,418 is their present value, so I'd write that right in there. Problem solved. That's what they owe right now. All right? So, let's go to the third problem. We now know the present value. We know the payment. We know the interest rate. Now we're trying to solve for the number of months left. Okay, well, we already know the answer because it's on this one up here, but hey, Don't cheat, don't look up. We already know the answer is 222, but let's see if it works out right. Let's go to your calculator. We only know the answer because I'm doing this exercise. You wouldn't know it out in the field if this is the only one you're trying to solve. So you already got present value 224 in it. You've got the payment in it. You've got the interest rate in it. So now all you got to do is take that 222 out of there and pretend it didn't exist, and now hit the periods button. Voila, it pops up, 222 months left. So very easy problem to solve. So now we know this is 222. Okay, I hope you're following me. All right, next problem. Now this one is going to blow your mind. Let's say we are at the seller's house and we agree that we owe the seller $300,000 present value here. The seller's payment on their underlying loan is $1,432.25 a month, PITI, at 4%. Okay, we already know that. So we know we're going to just make the same payment the seller's making. Now, of course, taxes and insurance will be on top of that, but that has nothing to do with this calculation. Okay, you've got to figure this first and then add tax and insurance on top of that. So we know there's 222 months left on the underlying loan. All right, and let's say our deal with the seller is we are going to pay, get this now because actually this is in my boot camp, but these are the words I would put in paragraph 18 on my contract. The principal and interest, the amount of principal and interest on this wrap to the seller equals the amount of principal and interest on their underlying loan. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Now notice I didn't say the rate, I said the amount. The amount of principal and interest on this wrap to the seller equals the same amount of principal and interest as the seller is paying on the underlying loan. Now, let's see what that means in reality here. I've agreed to pay the seller $300,000. But the seller only owes $222. So I've agreed, the seller's agreed, that I can just make the payment for him until sometime in the future. Now there may or may not be a balloon in this, because sometimes we get the seller to agree, just let us pay it until this is paid off. And at the end of that time, we'll pay the difference in a balloon. For example, if I owe the seller $300 a day, and I pay down the $222 at the same rate the seller's paying it down, then it looks to me like I owe the seller $78,000, the difference between this and this, when this debt pays off, if that's my agreement. Okay? There's two ways I can handle that. Number one, I can just put it in my contract, which will go in the note, that $78,000 balloon is due 30 days after this loan pays off. I'm going to say that again. I can put in there that $78,000 balloon, because that'll stay the same, even though this pays down, this difference today is what I'll owe him in 222 months. So I can put in there that I'll pay this loan off, and then 30 days later, I'll pay the $78,000 balloon. I might point out to you at that time, if you had the house that long, which is highly unlikely, you got a free and clear house except for his $78,000, because this is paid off. So it wouldn't be no big deal to go borrow the $78,000 from any private lender to pay him if you had to. But you know, that's so far away, it's unlikely you'll ever get to that point. Okay? Now, I could also say, get this words now, that the principal and interest on this wrap will be in the same amount as the principal and interest on the underlying loan. And 30 days after the underlying loan is paid off, I'm sorry, excuse that, and after the underlying loan is paid off, the principal and interest payment will continue at the same rate until the entire balance is paid to the seller. I'll say that again. The principal and interest on this wrap to the seller will pay down at the same amount of principal and interest as the underlying loan and continue at the same payment until the balance is paid off to the seller. So that means your payment of $1,432.25 will continue even after this is paid off until that $78,000 difference is paid off to the seller. which will go down pretty quick when you see what our interest rate is here. So truthfully, most of the time, you're going to wind up having to put a balloon in this. So we need to figure out how to figure out what the balloon amount is at any date and time that we choose as well. So I'll say it again. We're giving the seller a $300,000 wrap around their first mortgage of $222,000. The $300,000 wraps the $222,000. The attorney does all of that. We know the payment, and we know the amount of payments left on the underlying. So all we need to do is solve for the interest rate. So let's do that. Let's go to our little calculator here. And all right, so the present value we've already got in there, 224. No, I'm sorry, got to change the present value to 300,000. Because remember, that's what we owe him today. We're closing on this thing tomorrow, and we'll owe him $300,000. So put in there 300,000. All right, the payment stays the same. However, take out the interest rate, because that's what we're trying to solve for here. All right. Now the periods are going to be 222. So we're figuring out what our payment is on these 222 payments. But remember now, we're paying him $300. He only owes $222. So we're getting $78,000 worth of debt to the seller with no interest on it. I'm going to say that again. The deal with the seller is the payments on this $300 will equal the payments on your $222. So there's nothing left to pay on the $78,000. So that $78,000 is sitting there interest-free until we pay it off. So now let's figure out what the interest rate is. So now all you got to do is hit the rate button, and voila, our interest rate is 0.63. That means it's less than 1% interest. 0.63. I like that interest rate. Now I like 0 better, but that's pretty close, isn't it? So what that means is we're paying less than 1% interest on this $300,000, while the seller's paying 4% interest on this $222,000. That's how the banks have the big buildings, by the way. We use other people's money and make money from other people's money. All right, so we got one last problem to solve, and that is the balloon. How do I figure a balloon? Well, again, if you know 3, you just solve for the 4th. All right, so you're going to have to think with me on this one now. Let's say this is a 5-year balloon. We've agreed that we will pay the seller the same the payment that he is paying, but we're going to start with $300,000. But on the 60th month, we're going to pay him off the entire balance that's owed on this $300,000, and our interest rate is 0.63%. So we have to change our numbers to match that. So let's take our calculator out here. So we are solving for the present value. So take out your 300, because that's what we're trying to figure out. What is left after I pay them 59 payments? Now, incidentally, the balloon is not on. You don't put in 60 for 5 years, because the 60th payment is the balloon amount. So we want to know what we owe after we pay the 59th payment. So we're going to solve for present value. Okay, we have the payment in there already. It didn't change. It's $1,432.25. So now we've already got the annual rate in there, because remember, that is now our new interest rate on that present value that we started with of $300,000. So now we know that we got to change the 222, because there's no longer 222 periods. As you recall, I'm trying to figure out what is owed after I make the 59th payment. So here's the part you got to think through. Okay? If I am starting with 222 payments, I have to subtract the 59 payments I made from 222 to learn that I've got 163 payments left. So I'm actually figuring out what I will owe after I make 59 because I got 163 more to go if I want to retire this without a balloon. So the number of periods that we're going to put in here is 163. Let's see what happens, because that's the periods remaining. And let's solve for present value. And so we'll see 223,690. That means that we owe the seller $223,690 after a measly 5 years worth of payments have been made because we took the 59 from the 163. You can't put in the 163. You can't put in the 59. You have to put in the 163. It's the periods remaining, not the periods you've already paid if you want to figure out a balloon. Now the cool part about it here is we started with 300,000, got to pay down to 223,690 in 59 short months. Now you might be asking why? Well, because almost every bit of it went toward principal. That's why, because you have very, very little interest. So it's kind of cool when you learn how to do these calculations. And it's kind of important that you learn how to do these calculations before you go firing out offers to sellers that involve owner financing, so you can see where you're at. And frankly, I learned a lot of creative strategies back in the 80s when the prime rate was 18%. We had to use a lot of seller financing to buy and sell houses, so we learned a lot of creative stuff, which I'm not going to get into today, but just know that when you know how to calculate the other numbers and the other side don't, you can manipulate these numbers to your favor at any time. I mean, you know, there probably ain't one out of a million people in this country that understand what I did here to take this 300,000 and wind up paying 0.63% interest on it. Now, you don't deal with this at closing. I mean, at the house. This is not something you or the seller needs to know while you're in the house. Your contract says that you'll be paying $1,432 a month, and you'll be paying $300, and you'll be paying $222 or whatever you agree upon the number of months. But before you get to closing, you or your attorney is going to figure out that that is your interest rate on that loan. So you have it under contract before the seller even knows what that is. Frankly, I haven't had any problem with them on that because they did agree that this was the payment they were going to take, and that's really all they cared about. I found that many times they'd take zero interest if I asked them, or didn't even mention interest. So I know what you're thinking. Well, they're going to complain about that. Well, they might. Well, you're already under contract with them, and that should not be a deal killer for you. Okay, well, that's it for today. I hope that's enough to keep you pounding on those keys on that calculator. But I definitely want you to learn how to use that thing because it's pretty important in your future calculations. All right, Ron LeGrand signing off of Calculus 101 today. See you soon.